This, ladies and gentlemen, is football.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Total A-Leagues. I'm Vince Rugari, that's Tommy Oar. Good to have your company. Another interesting weekend in the A-League, Tommy. Big dramas at Sydney FC.
Yep.
A win finally for Melbourne Victory. Transfer windows open. Bit happening all around the place. About to lose some players as well for the Under-20 Asian Cup, which we'll get to in a second. But we'll start with our guest for this week's episode. It's Sydney FC coach Ufuk Talay. Ufi, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Vince. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. We'll get to the new news first, Ufi. We now know that Hayden Matthews is a Portsmouth player, reportedly a decent transfer fee for you guys as well, something in the realm of $2.5 million. Exciting for the player, good for the club. Just on him, how high do you think his ceiling is as a footballer?
Yeah, I still think Hayden's got a long way to go. I think there's a lot of potential there. He's still a young lad. Was chucked in the deep end last season, did very well for us. Had a very quick climb to the Socceroos, which he got a call up and got a cap, and continued to get game time with us. So we're very proud as a club to produce a player all the way through our academy, all the way through our first team, and now and sold overseas. So we're very proud of Hayden, and very proud that what he's achieved, and I believe he can go to bigger and better things again.
Ufi, from a Sydney FC perspective, with that in mind, obviously you've lost one of your key centre backs so far this season. Do you have anybody lined up to replace him, or is that an area you're going to look to strengthen in the coming few weeks?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening in the background. Alex Baumgarten deals with that stuff. We bring in a central defender. At the same time, we're still trying to get Popper over the line as well, which is very important for us. But yeah, hopefully in the next couple of days we'll have something more concrete.
Ufi, we know now as well, I think it happened overnight, that Alex Grant was released from his club in Asia. Is he a possibility? I mean, some of the Aussie centre-backs who have been available in this window have chosen to stay overseas, so they're not exactly growing on trees at the moment.
No, there's not a lot of players. Obviously, Australian players coming off contracts. We need to look for an Australian player. We've got our full 5 visa spots. These questions are normally for Alex more than for me, because he's the one that does the dealings and we tick off things collectively. But yeah, there are discussions happening with a couple of players at the moment. And like I said, hopefully in the next couple of days we'll have a concrete decision on if we get a player in.
Ufi, from a form and a playing style perspective, obviously we've seen so far this season, when you guys have played, your best football. I think it's been some of the best football to watch in the A-League. We love the positive approach, the attacking kind of intent. I think consistency has been an issue. What do you think, or what do you think the problems have been in terms of the consistency, and what are you doing on the training ground to try and address them?
Yeah, look, I think consistency has been in the sense of being able to name a starting 11 2 weeks in a row. I think having little niggles and having little injuries definitely hasn't helped. Obviously, losing players concussed and missing games definitely hasn't helped. But it's not an excuse. That means it's an opportunity for another player to come step up. We've shown that we can definitely score goals, but we've shown that we can concede goals at the same time as well. So for us, it's always, we want to dictate the terms with and without the ball, even when the opposition has the ball, and what we want them to do and how we want to do it. So we want to play an aggressive brand of football, which I believe resonates with the club of its size of Sydney FC. And then we want to try to play a brand of football in the sense of we give players freedom to find spaces within the game and make good decisions and use their attributes to the best that they can.
Ufi, I'd been curious to ask you as well, aside from, the football being a match, as you say, for what Sydney FC should be aspiring to be as a club, where does the inspiration for playing like this come from for you?
Yeah, look, for me, when I played and I was at Galatasaray, which is a big club, and the expectation was you're always sitting first or second. Vince, we wouldn't even get bonuses if we weren't sitting first or second. So the expectation is you play like a big club and then you dictate the terms with and without the ball. So, Sydney FC is one of the most trophies within this competition and is the biggest club in the country. And I believe that the football should, resonate with the club's history.
Ufi, finally, you've obviously got a lot of young kind of promising players in the front third, the likes of Quintal, Kaczarski, Segicic. I think if they were at a different A-League club, I think they would probably be starting a lot more games than they have been just because of the quality you've got in the front third. How do you manage that, and how do you keep players kind of motivated, obviously they haven't probably had as many opportunities as I'm sure they would like.
Yeah, look, I think across the A-League, if you look at where the visa players brought in, it's generally in the front third of each team. And, it's not easy for young players, getting game time. And that's why we've also, loaned out Woody to Perth so he gets some match minutes and come back hopefully with more minutes in his legs. So, those boys understand their role within the team. It's like a family. Everyone plays a role within the family. When they get their opportunity, they go out there and do their best. But also, they want to work with good players, and that gives them a learning opportunity within the training environment and also the game environment.
Ufuk, you got a game against Adelaide United at the weekend who've been pretty good in the league this season. How important is this in terms of getting a positive result just for the way that the top six is shaping up? And also, how far away is Douglas Costa from appearing again?
Yeah, look, it's great. We're playing a team that's in good form. Adelaide is always a strong side, and I think they've done well. So for us at home, we play Adelaide, and then we play Western Sydney at home, and then we go into an ACL game, which is very important for us. So three very important games back to back. That we're playing at home that we need to win to stay close. The table is very tight. If you look at the table, I think 2 wins and you get yourself, up close to the teams up top. So for us, it's very important that we first perform well, play well, and get all 3 points at the same time.
Ufuk, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the show, and good luck for the weekend.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.
Tommy, it's I think what Ufuk said towards the end there, we need to remember that sometimes in terms of the ladder and how quickly things can change in the A-League, because there's a lot of Sydney FC fans who are unhappy with the way they're going this season, their direction, their overall form. But it can change bloody quickly in this league, which is why I think we need to cut them a little bit of slack. Like, they can't lose games.
There's no need to panic. But at the same time, I still think a lot of the criticisms and a lot of the frustration from a fan perspective is founded, because the trajectory that they're on isn't a good one. I think their performance against Brisbane was definitely the worst one of the season. Obviously, to lose a game as important as the Big Blue as well. It's just been a couple of kind of sucker blows after another. And I think we've seen in their games that they've often in the last 10 minutes, they've kind of had a rally and salvaged a point or salvaged a result, but the performance hasn't been great. And I think that looking at that from a bigger picture, I think that, if they were to lose those games instead of getting a result, it could be a very different discussion.
Yeah. I mean, it goes both ways, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Like, things can turn quickly for good or worse. Yeah. Not so long ago that they were on like a 5 or 6 unbeaten streak, but then results the calibre that they've had the last couple of weeks, you can't have it. So it's got to end. But I'm just saying, they can jump up the ladder extremely quickly.
And if they're in the 6 at come finals time, no one wants to play them. I think that's clear.
Yeah. All right, Tommy, let's talk a little bit about Melbourne Victory. They did beat Sydney FC at the weekend. They needed that bad, huh? Especially after Dillers. We've been talking about, how long can you go on, I guess, in this job without getting a win for a club like Melbourne Victory. I think Daniel McBreen was telling us earlier, it's the longest any Melbourne Victory manager has had to wait for this feeling.
It is. It's a huge monkey off their back, and I think that they've been quite unlucky, I think, in the first 6 games. And I think they finally probably had their first complete performance from the first to the 90th minute. I thought they were so good in that game. Controlled the game for large portions, even though they didn't have most of the possession. I just thought, they didn't really look vulnerable defensively. I do think individual mistakes was the thing that was letting them down in the games prior. And obviously a few changes to the lineup as well, but overall I'm sure he's very pleased.
How optimistic are you about what they can do now? When you look at their upcoming games, they got Perth Glory away, Newcastle Jets away, Wellington at home, and then the Melbourne Derby. I mean, they're all winnable, but especially the first 3, I would have thought.
Well, I think so. I think that I'm sure they'll be, hoping to use that Big Blue as a platform to really kind of re-kickstart their season. They're still in the top 6, and they're still like there or thereabouts. So, they've got so much quality in their squad, and even in their performance on the weekend, I think that there's enough there for fans to be excited about, for them to go on to have a meaningful end to this season and perhaps get some silverware, I think.
Yeah. Interesting about Daniel Arzani as well.
Yeah.
I was last week at a roundtable interview that Tony Popovich did with journalists just to talk about what's ahead for the Socceroos, and we got to ask him all the questions we wanted to ask. And one of the people there asked him about Daniel Arzani, who he obviously coached at Melbourne Victory last season. And the question was put to him basically, where are you at in terms of Daniel Arzani is in your thinking for the Socceroos coming up. They've got these huge games in March against Indonesia and China, and his answer was, well, let's hear the answer first, and I'm sure we've got a lot to discuss around it. It was an interesting one from Popper.
I know Daniel well, and he's got potential, and we talk about him with potential. I think we've been talking about that since he was 18. What's he now, 25, 26? And when he doesn't play, everyone questions why he doesn't play. But he needs to raise his level. We need goals, we need assists. That's what Daniel needs to do. So, doing one good dribble or one good trick, or setting up one goal, should not be enough to play for Socceroos. It needs to be more. I had him in camp in October. He knows what I think of him. So I'll be telling you something now that he knows. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't good enough in October. His level was really poor in training. Now maybe for him it's okay, but it's not enough. So every player needs to raise their level.
Didn't mince his words.
Nah, you don't often hear a coach put a player on blast publicly like that, but Daniel's probably a special case in that regard.
Yeah.
And the thing that gets me, I guess, the most about what Popper had to say there is Daniel Arzani played under Popper and Melbourne Victory. He should know Popper's a very demanding coach.
Yep.
That wouldn't be news to him. And so he came to camp in October and he knew where the bar would probably be that Popovic would be setting, and he didn't clear it. And that's pretty damning. And look, I love the idea of Daniel Arzani, the player. I think we all do. Like we know that there's something special in there, but it's hard to argue with what Popper said there for me.
Well, I think as well, if you look back at previous coaches that Arzani's worked with, I think the sentiment's often been quite similar, and some of the feedback that you've had from managers, even at his time at FC Utrecht over there, they were critical of his attitude. I think these are all preventable things, but I do think that a lot of people talk about his application in terms of his attitude towards things, but I actually think in a football sense, if he made more of a kind of conscious or proactive effort to get into more goal scoring positions, to score more goals, to be more proactive with his positioning, I think that a lot of these problems might go away, because I do think that we all know when he has the ball at his feet how dangerous he is and how technical he is, but you rarely see him make these forward runs running behind for other people to give the ball to him to score goals. And I think that that's a part of his game that I think is often overlooked and something I think he needs to work on.
Yeah, he's 26, which is a bit of a shock, because it feels like yesterday was that incredible spell he had for Melbourne City leading into the 2018 World Cup.
Yeah,
he's mid-career, but it's also not too late for him. We know that there's players who are late bloomers for whatever reason, and I'm not sure this has happened to Daniel in terms of a coach being so blunt in public about it. I personally just hope it lights a fire in him.
Absolutely, and it could go either way, because you see with some players, sometimes although he's a flashy player, sometimes a player needs an arm around the shoulder and needs to play with more confidence, and some other players respond better to the rocket like he's just got from Popper. So it'll be interesting to see, follow him in the next month to see how his form is affected by that.
Some interesting news as well about one of his teammates at Victory during the week, Ryan Teague. Has reportedly got an offer on the table to play for China from the Chinese Football Association. A report actually out of China suggests that Kevin Muscat's club, Shanghai Port, is in for him as well. Because Ryan Teague, news to me and probably everyone else that his mother has Chinese heritage, so he is able to qualify that way. Now, my understanding, and I'm not a expert when it comes to, I wouldn't classify this as geopolitics, but I don't know the ins and outs of citizenship. But what I do know is that China doesn't recognise dual nationality. So there's a chance if he was to choose to play for China that he might have to surrender his Australian passport or citizenship, which is, push that to one side. Yeah. Football-wise, though, what are you doing if you're him? Because you're looking at the Socceroos. Yeah. And he's a great player in the A-League at the moment. But we got a lot of central midfielders. That's right.
I think that if that move was to come to fruition, that's one of Asia's biggest teams, and obviously working with someone like Kevin Muscat, I think that if the right terms were offered, I think that would be too good of an offer to refuse. But there's a lot of ifs and buts in that situation, and for him right now, seeing it out to the end of the season might not be the worst thing as well, because he's playing regular football. He's playing his best football that he has in his A-League career so far, and it's definitely going to be one to watch in the next 2 weeks of the transfer window. Yeah.
So to Adelaide United, Tommy, they didn't play the weekend just gone. They were supposed to play Brisbane Roar, but that game got postponed due to a concert at Suncorp Stadium. So they're fresh, and they've got Sydney FC at Allianz on Saturday. Interesting game. First of all, just we spoke about the form that Sydney FC had. Adelaide are, they're looking pretty good and they're fresh.
Exactly.
How dangerous is this game for Sydney if they don't come with that correct mentality?
Well, I think this is a huge game because, as we say, that you just touched on, obviously it doesn't take much. You lose 1 or 2 games here and you can lose, not be in touching distance of the top 6. And this is probably one of the games you don't want to be, the timing of the season, so you don't want to be playing Adelaide. And, every question that's been asked of Adelaide this season, they've had an answer for. They play such good attacking football, but I think defensively in recent weeks, they've looked much more assured as well. And no, I think they've been fantastic. And then they play, for me, they're probably my favourite team to watch in the competition.
Yeah. It's important they pick up results here as well because they're about to lose some players, particularly defensively. We found out during the week the Australian squad for the upcoming Under-20 Asian Cup. And Adelaide has 4 players in it. And Macarthur has the most players. They've got 5 players. But Adelaide's 4 players. 3 of them, I guess you would say, are regular first teamers. One is a nailed-on starter, and for me, one of the most impressive young players in the competition, Panakikianis. But then we've also got Luka Jovanovic, who is a potential match winner on his day, and Johnny Yole, who is a really exciting midfielder and is usually one of their first options off the bench.
Yep.
So things are about to be disrupted a little bit there.
It's bittersweet, I guess, because on one hand, I think it's important for these young players' development to play these international tournaments, and I think it can improve them a lot and improve their market value as well if they want to ultimately sell those players on.
There's scouts at these things all the time, right?
Exactly.
Particularly the World Cup. And I should add as well, it's the top 4 who qualify from the Asian tournament who qualify for the World Cup later in the year. And there'll be even more scouts there.
And I think if you consider that, I think in terms of, you look at the players that they're going to be missing, I do think they go have experienced players in those positions to replace them. Which is like, for example, Isaias can slot into centre-back for Kikianis relatively comfortably, I think. And I think that's a luxury that they've put themselves in a good position and they've recruited really well with that in mind, I think.
A quick word on your under-20 career. You went to a couple of these tournaments?
I did. I went to 2 of them, actually. So, I think the first one I went to was, I hadn't really broken through at the Brisbane Roar, but the second one I was more kind of established. And actually, no, the second one, I was already playing at Utrecht, actually, now I think about it. But they're fantastic tournaments. And, international football kind of matures you a lot as a footballer as well, because I think the challenges you face in international football are very different. And I think the games are much more tactical. And I think that from a young player, I think you learn a lot tactically in those tournaments.
Yeah, interesting. So just to cap off on that, these players who are in this squad will be assembling in camp next week. So this is the last round for them. We want to see them in the final.
Yep.
The final will be March the 1st. So worst case scenario / best case, depending on how you look at it, they'll be gone for a month.
Right. And it's a long time.
It is. And there'll be at least 4 games for most teams there, a couple of midweekers, I'd imagine, in there.
And obviously it's a busy schedule when these players are away and they can play 6 or 7 games in a short space of time. Sometimes I had it as well. You come back from those tournaments and you're quite fatigued. It's not a matter of coming back and just hitting the ground running. You almost need a bit of time to readjust back to the A-League. So it's definitely one to watch.
Yep. So all the best to the young Socceroos for that. To the top of the table, Tommy, Auckland FC. So Adelaide's last game was that 2-2 draw at High Marsh where Auckland snatched it at the death. Incredible game. Incredible. Can't call it a celebration. What's the opposite of a celebration? What Carl Viet did. I thought it was pretty good. And I loved the pump up from Bimby as well. Steve Corica giving it to the crowd. But then they go to Western Sydney and pinch it at the death as well. That's a 1-0 win over the Wanderers. And that's
becoming a trend.
It's a cliche, but that's champion quality, isn't it? Don't you think?
It is. And I think that finding a way to win or get a result in a game is what great teams do, and they have done that time and time again. The amount of late goals they've scored has actually been phenomenal this season. So, I think there's a lot of belief in that squad, and even late in the game, I think that's unwavering.
Yeah. On that, by the way, a stat I'm going to steal shamelessly from Philip Rollo, the Kiwi journo. If games ended at 90 minutes in the league this season, Auckland would not be in the top 4. So that's how pivotal some of those late goals and late results has been for them. Which has been really impressive.
And I think that the interesting thing, I think a lot of teams as well, they play Auckland, and I think Auckland would be such a frustrating team to play because I think a lot of teams often have the possession against them, but they don't really create chances, and as the game kind of goes on, you might get frustrated and start to send too many numbers forward. You can be a little bit naive, I think. I think that's also why they've been able to take advantage of that, but that's why those opportunities have kind of presented themselves.
Yeah. Let's hear quickly now from Auckland FC coach Steve Corica, who spoke after the match on the weekend.
Just the culture and the attitude of the players, we work hard at training. We drive them really hard physically, and I think it shows by the end of the game that we run over a lot of teams. I think in the second half we score late goals, and that's just never given up really. And it's becoming a habit, obviously, which is good for us. Bad for other teams. When you score that late, there's just no opportunity to get back into the game.
Deserves a lot of credit, Bimby, I think. I was one of the people who thought he stayed on at Sydney FC as coach for probably a season, a little bit too long.
Yep.
Needed to sort of leave the club he'd been at for almost 20 years just to get some different perspectives. The club needed that too, I think, as well. But huge credit for what he's done at Auckland. Not easy to build a club from the ground up, even though expansion teams, for whatever reason, in the A-League start well. It still takes strategy and, all the stuff that he brings as a coach. It looks like he's developed further as a coach as well. They've got a really strong defensive base and some flexibility in attack as well. They're not relying on one player to score their goals. They're being spread around as well.
Agree.
And the funny thing is early to talk silverware here, but he is in contention to be one of the most successful coaches in Australian football history in terms of championships or grand finals won, at least to begin with, because Ange has won 4, 2 in the NSL, 2 in the A-League. The only others who have won more than 2, including all of domestic football in Australia as well, from what I could tell, were Eddie Thompson and Zoran Matic, who both had 3.
Right.
But with 2, you're talking Kevin Muscat, you're talking Graham Arnold.
Overtaking them,
which is would be pretty special for a guy like Steve Corica, who's, probably no one has him in that category of coach. But if he wins this next one, or if he continues to, develop Auckland FC into the club they seem like they're becoming, huge credit.
And I think that he probably doesn't get the credit he deserves, because if you think back to his time at Sydney FC, he took over from Graham Arnold, who was hugely successful. And I think a lot of people thought that he just kind of inherited that team and he wasn't really changing much. But we've seen other clubs, that's not easy to do in itself. He did actually slowly kind of sign new players and kind of tweak their playing style and managed to win trophies there as well. And obviously, there was huge question marks when he left. Now, as you just touched on, to go to a new club, recruit and build a whole kind of football team and philosophy from the ground up in such a short space of time. They look like a team that's been playing together for 4 or 5 years, and it looks like he's been building this for a long time. But the fact he's put it together so quickly, I think speaks volumes, and 100% I think that he's one of Australia's most exciting coaching prospects.
Culture just doesn't happen, by the way. You can't just, it just doesn't appear. Like, you've got to make an effort to create the kind of culture that's getting them over the line in games as well. So
absolutely.
Hats off to Bimby. They've got Macarthur FC on the weekend. Interesting matchup, first versus third.
Yeah.
And they've got probably the form player in the competition, would you say, at the moment, in Jed Drew?
Yeah. I think, in terms of goals and assists, undisputed. I think that he's been brilliant to watch in recent weeks, and the energy that he plays with. And I think that the thing that impresses me about Macarthur is they play to their strengths. They know how strong he is at running in behind, and nobody hesitates to give those through balls to him. And I think that you see in other teams, players don't always necessarily play to each other's strengths and can look a little bit more clunky, but going forward, they're a beautiful team to watch. But I still think against Auckland this weekend, they're going to have to be at their best to get a result in this game. Yeah,
catch the tactician this week as well, by the way. Daniel McBreen's got an interesting bit on Valère Germain, who, for me, if he was at any other club, he'd be talked about a whole lot more.
Very underappreciated as well, and obviously goals and assists, but his link-up play is fantastic. He's got a great personality. It's I think he's been a fantastic signing for Macarthur, and I think Macarthur is definitely a dark horse for silverware this year. Yeah.
Well, not if they lose Jed Drew, though, because there's an interesting question there. The window in Australia is still open until the 12th, I think, of February, so there's reports that he might be looking at a club in Sweden.
Right.
Mile Stojovski had a chat after the game on the weekend about whether the time is right for Jed to explore his options overseas.
When you look at his form, we've said it all along, once he gets consistency, he'll start getting recognition for it, and that's exactly what's happened. Is he ready to go overseas? It's difficult to say. Everybody's different when they get over there. In my opinion, I think he probably should stay and play a few more games in the A-League and get more experience. But if it happens to be now when he decides to go, we wish him the best. And it's difficult to say.
Yeah, I think I like Mile Stojovski's comments there, because I think that sometimes hearing these rumours can kind of be like confirmation that you're on the right track, but I kind of agree with him. I don't think it is the right time for him to go overseas. I also think it's important to differentiate, because we often talk about A-League players going overseas, but where are they going? I think it's important not to just lump all of Europe, for example, together and say, oh, he's going to Europe. Where in Europe is he going? Who's the coach? You know what I mean? All these things, I think it's very important to kind of judge it on a case-by-case basis. So it'll be interesting to see if they do get any offers and what those offers are.
The other aspect of that is if he wants to play for the Socceroos, it would seem sensible to go overseas and establish yourself there, but not if you want to play in March.
That's right.
Because he would have to establish himself very quickly to be in hot form come March 20 when the Socceroos play Indonesia for that game. He's been probably one of the most consistent young players. We've talked about a lot of young players on this show about how good they've been in flashes and all that. Jed's sort of done it for most of the season.
Yep.
And another thing that Popper said the other day in that interview is he's just sort of challenged all young players to raise their level, do it consistently. One, as he said about Arzani, was talking about Arzani, but talking to everyone, I think. Is one goal, one trick, one assist is not enough. Well, Jed's got 13 of goals and assists in 13 games. So you'd like to think he'll be on the cusp of selection, but I just think that would be endangered a little bit if he went now.
I completely agree. But at the same time, when you're changing clubs, I think you need to look at the big picture often because, in an ideal world, you don't change clubs too often in your career. So, those they're defining moments and you never know when the opportunity is going to come up again. So I think that for him to turn down an offer if he thought it was the right one because of that window, I think would maybe not be the right kind of mind frame to be in. But at the same time, he's on the right track. And if he continues this form, I think it's only a matter of time before he does get overseas.
Win a Johnny Warren medal and I think your options increase anyway in that respect. So that's good. He might be off contract though, which is an interesting one.
Very interesting.
Macarthur, they might need to sell him to make sure they get a sell-on clause in future.
Yep.
So watch that space. The transfer window, Tommy, still open, bit happening. Alex Grant, aside from Sydney FC, who else should be going for him, do you think?
Well, I think the Wanderers defensively.
Half the league.
I think a lot of teams' issues are defensively. I think obviously Auckland's the one where you think that defensively they look really strong and I don't think they need to change too much, but almost every other team could make a case for strengthening defensively and that's definitely one to keep an eye on. Obviously one with a lot of A-League experience as well and physically kind of imposing and a natural leader. So that's definitely one that I think most teams could be a shrewd signing.
I mentioned Aussie centre-backs before staying in Europe. Milos Dejanek is staying in Serbia. He's gone to another club aside from Red Star Belgrade. Bit of other stuff. Ariath Pjol confirmed at Real Salt Lake, as we mentioned. Yep. Macarthur might be losing another one. There's reports of Ollie Jones in talks with Randers of Denmark, which is where Paul Izzo is.
History there.
Yeah. There must be an Aussie agent or connection there who's getting some business done, which is good. Also in the league, Faisal's gone from Perth to the Mariners.
Yep.
Mizunuma, who's come from Yokohama F. Marinos, gone to the Newcastle Jets, dead ball specialist.
Yep.
Early evidence is he's putting them on a dime there.
Definitely.
And that's really important for the Jets as well, a team that, if you're struggling to score goals, set pieces are important anyway.
Huge.
But even more important than if you don't have a regular outlet. So if he can keep putting corners on the penalty spot, they become a more dangerous team. Mohamed Altay has gone from the Phoenix to the Wanderers. Tas Mortakudis, as we suspected, has turned up at Perth Glory.
Yep.
Question without notice, who's had the best window so far?
That's hard because there's been so many departures. It's a difficult one to say.
It has to be Perth, right?
Yeah,
because
they've been the busiest as well.
And they needed to be.
And they've had a real uptick in form as well. I think in the last month, I think their performance has been a lot better. So, going into this transfer window, a lot of teams, for example, the Mariners, kind of were talking in public. We obviously saw Mark Jackson talk in the press conference after the Sydney FC game, how he wants to have a busy window. They've only brought in one player. I still think there's a lot of kind of movement to happen in the coming weeks.
Yeah. In terms of who needs what at this stage now, aside from Sydney FC needing a centre-back, or at least two,
I think the Mariners need number
need
9.
Something more in attack. Probably a number 9 because Ryan Edmondson just hasn't had it consistently. Alu Kuol's got it every now and then.
Yep.
Need another something, not just striker for me, just creative spark.
Agree. And I think that, Wanderers, need a centre-back. I think if they're going to get into the 6 and be a team that is taken seriously in the finals, I think they're one centre-back short as well. Yeah, you can make a case for the other teams as well. I think, but at the same time, you look at someone like Western United, on paper, before this season, we probably were thinking, they don't have the quality. But you look what John Aloisi has done with that team. I think that coaches getting the best out of the players they already have on their books will be important, obviously, as well.
Totally. Quick call out for questions for next week as well. If you've got any good questions that you want us to answer on the show, drop them in the YouTube comments. or social media for me or Tommy Oar, or find a carrier pigeon and send it my way. I don't care how you do it, but just come up with some good ones and we'll answer them. Here's a little taste as well of what they're talking about this week on Dub Zone.
Coming up on Dub Zone, a glorious free kick silences the roar in the West. Alani Janchevsky seals the big blue for Melbourne Victory. And Matilda, Jessica Nash joins us after the Mariners' big win over the Knicks. I'll be joined by Teo and Teresa. And what are you both looking forward to?
We've seen some wonder strikes of free kicks. Janchevsky, Ella Abdulmasi. That's what I'm really looking forward to looking at this week.
I'm looking forward to hearing from Jessica Nash about why the Mariners have the best defence in the Ninja A-League.
Very interesting stuff. That and plenty more to come on this week's edition of Dub Zone on 10 Play and the A-League's YouTube channel and website.
Tommy, into extra time.
Yep.
We'll start with a good stat here. I don't know if you call it a stat, but anyway, I'm going to call it a stat. In England, they had the longest away trip in the Football League. It was Plymouth to Sunderland, but it turns out that is shorter than any interstate trip in Australia or New Zealand.
There you go.
Which goes to show, I mean, and here's the question for you.
Yeah.
Do we underestimate how committed some of the A-League fans are who travel to games, particularly... Mate, if you look at Perth, we're about to see, there's about 30-odd Perth fans who have gone to Newcastle. They're spending, roughly estimating, about $1,000 a head.
That's the thing. It's obviously the time and the inconvenience of travelling so far, but it's also a cost, and I think that that shouldn't be underestimated. I think there's a lot of A-League fans. For example, there's probably a lot of Sydney FC fans living in Melbourne or Perth, wherever it is, and I'm sure that's a small portion of the travelling fans in some situations, but there's no doubt that, you know, those hard-on supporters are the nailed-on ones that travel with their teams. Like, that is absolute dedication.
Yeah, mad respect. Tommy, the F3 Derby is back this weekend. What is the second greatest trophy in world sport behind the F3 Derby trophy, which I think we all agree is the best?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The A-League has the toilet seat and that one, and they're definitely both in contention, I think.
We're the toilet seat and the lid. I think we underestimate how well those two go together. I'm a big fan of this, not football, but the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
I like the idea of, like, you've got this massive cup and this platform, and you just keep adding bits. And so there's, theoretically, in the year 3000, you won't be able to get that thing into a room.
That's true.
I rate
Need
that.
a crane.
Yeah. Tommy, the Raw and Wanderers play on Friday.
Yeah.
Tell me about your recollections of that insane semi-final, 5-4. I remember watching this game and just what is going on here.
Yeah, I only joined the Raw maybe a month before, so I was kind of just getting match fit. It was obviously the end of the season in the finals, and I was on the bench. I can't remember what the score was when I came on, but it was like 4-2 or 4-3. It was something crazy, but that game had everything, and obviously I was on the wrong end of the scoreline, but you know, now I've had, you know, the emotions, after the emotions kind of went away and I sat back, I thought that I'll never play another game like that. And I remember the atmosphere at that game was special.
I've never seen a game like that since. So,
absolutely.
This one comes after the two Matters swap shirts after the Wanderers Auckland game. The best shirt swap you've ever either been involved in or heard of?
I mean, the Socceroos, obviously the last World Cup, we saw the Socceroos players scrambling to get Messi's jersey. And I think Cammy Devlin ended up getting one and wearing it on the flight back to Australia, so no one stole it. And I think it's in a safe somewhere now, so I think that was a genius move from him. That's probably going to be worth a lot of money one day.
I'd hire security to stand in front of the safe as well if I was him. How much money would Mark Viduka go for if he was leaving the A-League at the moment, keeping in mind that at 19 he'd won the Johnny Warren medal twice and scored 47 goals in 53 matches. If Hayden Matthews has gone for 2.5?
Honestly, who knows? It would be something astronomical because, I mean, he's in you know, top couple of most talented Socceroos of all time, but also was flourishing young. So, honestly, in these days, I'm going to say...
10?
I'm going to say 15 mil. I'm going to go rogue. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Probably about that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's impossible to say.
I don't have an inflation calculator in my head, so it's a bit hard for me. But, man, we would not stop talking about a play like that if he came through. So, fingers crossed, some of the young players in the league can kick on to that level.
Yeah.
Tommy, job done for another week. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Thanks to you at home for watching. We'll see you next week.